Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into a really unusual idea that surfaced recently.
Yeah, quite startling, actually.
It's this proposal, apparently floated by President Trump, about potentially detaining U.S. citizens, but not here in El Salvador.
That's right. The remarks were made by President Trump. It was on Monday, just before a press briefing he had with President Bukele of El Salvador. So the source is pretty direct.
And there was a specific quote making the rounds?
Yes, he reportedly told Bukele something like, "The homegrowns are next. The homegrowns."
Homegrowns, wow.
Yeah, and followed it up with, "You've got to build about 5 more places,"
Yeah.
suggesting, El Salvador needs more prison capacity for them.
Meaning U.S. citizens specifically. It sounds like a direct suggestion to house Americans in Salvadoran prisons.
That's certainly how it's being interpreted.
Okay, so what's the context here? Is this completely out of the blue?
Well, not entirely, in the sense that El Salvador is already holding some individuals flown there from the U.S.
Right, people detained in the States?
Exactly. For alleged lack of legal status or sometimes suspected gang affiliations, that transfer process itself isn't new.
But that process is drawing criticism, hasn't it? Especially around the legal side.
Absolutely. Big concerns have been raised. Some critics say individuals deported to El Salvador had very limited, maybe even no, real due process here in the U.S. before they were sent.
And due process is, well, fundamental. The legal steps ensuring fairness.
It is. And there are even claims, allegations, really, that some of these removals might have happened despite U.S. court orders trying to stop them.
Okay, so that's the backdrop. Then President Trump makes this comment about homegrowns.
Mhm.
What was Bukele's reaction?
Well, reports suggest President Bukele responded by indicating El Salvador does have space available in its prisons.
He said they have space.
That was the reported response, yes.
So this brings us to the core of our deep dive today. What are the implications, legally, practically, if the U.S. were to actually try and detain its own citizens in another country's prisons?
Legally, it's it's a massive issue. You've got legal scholars looking at this, like David Beer from the Cato Institute.
And what's his take?
He basically called it obviously unconstitutional, said there's just no legal authority for it.
Right. I mean, the idea of deporting or externally imprisoning your own citizens, it just sounds wrong.
His point is that U.S. law doesn't allow for deporting citizens, full stop, let alone locking them up in a foreign jail.
Does Beer suggest why such an idea might even be floated? Is there a suspected motive?
He does raise a concern. He worries this could be, perhaps, an attempt to get around judicial review.
To bypass the courts.
Yeah, specifically for deportations involving people who are U.S. citizens but whose status might be disputed or complex. He mentioned past accusations against the administration for allegedly deporting people illegally without proper oversight.
So the fear is this could be a way to avoid legal challenges.
That's the concern Beer flags, a potential move to sort of outsource the detention and make it harder for U.S. courts to intervene.
It's really quite something to even think about the U.S. government considering this for its own citizens. Feels like a major line being crossed, or at least discussed.
It absolutely would be. I think most legal experts would agree. It represents a really unprecedented kind of challenge to the civil liberties we associate with U.S. citizenship.
Yeah, the basic protections you expect.
Those core rights and protections within your own country, they're foundational in constitutional law.
So for you listening, this whole situation really pushes on some fundamental questions, doesn't it? Like, what does citizenship actually guarantee? What does due process mean if it can potentially be bypassed like this?
Exactly. If a proposal like this, even just the idea, were to gain traction, what are the wider effects?
And are there any historical parallels, maybe not direct ones, but situations that could, shed some light on what happens when citizens' rights are curtailed in such extreme ways? Definitely something to think about.